I think whether it's an adult or a child, there's always this expectation of like, oh, the holidays are so fun and jolly, and you need to be fun and jolly. And, anybody who knows anything about mental health knows that it's peaks and valleys and baby steps on one day and doing okay the next. And so I think just recognizing and setting expectations to be realistic is really important to remember.
Yeah, and for teens,
Yeah, I think whenever you raise awareness about something, you become more aware about something. With the teen violence that we had, we all became more aware, and so now everyone's a little more vigilant about teen violence. And so when you sort of make help seeking cool and you destigmatize mental health, more kids are going to come forward to find the help because it's now more acceptable. So I think that flood of people coming forward is a result of awareness and education that it's okay not to be okay. But I'd also say there's a ton of stressors going on. We have economic stressors, we have social media and phones. Kids aren't moving their bodies, they're not learning how to cope. And so you see the complexity of the situation is there's a lot of like moving parts, genetics, environment, all sorts of things. But the phones and social media have definitely allowed kids to sort of escape and sort of numb out. And so then when hard things happen, they don't know how to process them.
yeah.
I think it's definitely an accelerant. It's an accelerant to everything, whether it's cyberbullying or suicide or just stress in general. It's an accelerant. You can find really good content, you can find really dark content. So if you're already feeling low, you can find content to reinforce what you're thinking. If you're feeling really good, you can find content to reinforce that. So if you're a kid that's struggling and you're following something kind of dark, that's not going to lift your spirits at all. That's going to add to the complexity of the situation. Yeah, and I would say even for teens that are just kind of having a bad day, you can call Teen Lifeline, you can call 988. As an adult, you can call Teen Lifeline and 988 and get support. So it doesn't have to be that you're actively suicidal to use those resources as what we call a warm line. Parents need to put their phones down, pay attention, and be present. They absolutely have to be present. There's so much going on in these kids' lives that you want to know about, and that open communication is so important. When parents are more interested in being on phones to make more money or doing whatever you're doing on your phone than sitting at the dinner table and having a tech-free dinner, that's going to show in how your kids show up in their worlds, what they believe in, what they align with, who they hang out with, what they think is important. We have a very tight-knit community who's very deep in their faith. Those families commit to a lot of those things that I just talked about, right? And so you don't have to be a spiritual family to have values that align with being present, being open, and being communicative with each other. But I think for a lot of families, and I've watched this for over 30 years, parents are like, oh, he's 15. He can dress himself, he can get his food, he can get himself to school, like he's good. And that is absolutely our most at-risk age is 15 to 17-year-old boys, nationwide and locally.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit why that is?
Yeah, I mean, they're just so impulsive. Their prefrontal cortex is not developed until age 32. And when you have access to alcohol, substances, and lethal means, and you're feeling teetering, we know statistically that any home that has an accessible firearm is more likely to have a teen suicide than not. Yeah, there are a few documentaries out there that I love. The Social Dilemma, Childhood 2.0. There are so many ways to take a deep dive into this. And what I love about those documentaries, especially Childhood 2.0, is there are kids in the movie saying, if my parents knew what I was watching, what I have access to, what I am learning, they would never let me have a phone. And so there are many ways for parents to be more aware and be more educated. And then talking to your kids, like I have 10, 15 kids over my house every night, boys and girls. And we all just sit around the island and they tell me all the things. When you have an open door, they'll tell you everything. When you're strict or overbearing or controlling, they won't tell you anything.
Cells, what's the home cells?
Yeah, I think it needs to start at very young ages. We're starting to see suicidal ideation in 5 to 11-year-olds. And so we have to be educating our kids around what do you do when you feel lonely or sad or frustrated? How do you cope with that? It should not be an iPad. It should be reaching out to parents and to friends, to coaches. Putting your kids in sports and activities is such a protective factor around gaining confidence around mental health issues. And so really having a kid that's involved in sports and activities, that is an additional layer of protection around your kids as well.
What age?
I always lean on the science and all the experts. The Surgeon General has said, please don't give your child a phone until at least age 13, and please don't give social media before 16. We have all of the science that says this is terrible, it's ruining our kids, it's leading to mental health issues. That's not to say I have 4 kids with 4 phones. They seem to be managing them pretty well, but I'm also supervising the heck out of it. You know, I use a monitoring software, I check phones, I do random phone checks. They're not in their bedrooms overnight. It is an extra layer of parenting for sure.
Okay. That might be good. Just
Yeah. I
give
mean,
a
it's,
parenting technique.
yeah. Well, and just like having a central charging station where all the phones go. So that, I mean, the overnight hours are most worrisome. Not that they can't do funny business during the day, but overnight when they think parents are sleeping is when a lot of the yuck happens.
With friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to be the parent, and it's not necessarily like when we check on them or we verify information, it's not necessarily your child I'm worried about. It's sometimes saving them from themselves because they do have half of a brain. And so you are their prefrontal cortex. You are the parent, they are the child.
Yeah.
They still need guidance even if they're 17.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, a lot of what goes on around here, and we saw this with the goons, was like parents trying to keep up with their kids, and their party lifestyle was their kids' party lifestyle, you know. So a lot of parents living vicariously through their kids.